And I now give the floor to His Excellency Mohamed Siala, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Libya.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may the peace of God be with you. President Fayez al-Sharar was not able to be here at this session of the General Assembly as a result of the latest developments in Tripoli, and he gave me the responsibility of giving this statement on his behalf. President, allow me to congratulate the President of the General Assembly on her election to the helm of this General Assembly session. I would like to wish her the best of success, and I can assure her of our full cooperation to realize the goals of the General Assembly. I would also like to express my thanks to Mr. Miroslav Lajčák for the efforts that he undertook last year. I would also like to welcome the efforts undertaken by Secretary General Antonio Guterres to realize the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter. President, there is no doubt that my country continues to be subject to a great deal of attention and monitoring from the United Nations and the international community. We would like to thank all of those who have undertaken sincere efforts to help us to overcome these difficult circumstances. We would like to underscore, furthermore, the need to coordinate these efforts and to avoid any divergences when initiatives are launched, because this lessens the chances of overcoming the crisis. We believe that we need to coordinate with the United Nations before we hold a regional or international meeting on the Libyan issue, to ensure that the results and the conclusions of this meeting are compatible with the UN vision. The Presidency Council of the Government of National Accord, since its establishment, has understood the scope of the challenges that we are facing, notably the upsurge in terrorism, political divergences, security instability, and the economic crisis, which has had a deleterious impact on the lives of Libyans and the quality of services. We remain committed to find solutions to these problems. We, last year, suggested a roadmap to overcome the crisis. This is a document that is based on the holding of presidential and legislative elections and the cessation of fighting, unless it's fighting against terrorism, and the necessary conditions for national reconciliation. This approach, in our view, will be able to unify the national institutions and allow us to create a democratic and modern state. However, we haven't seen any reciprocity from the relevant institutions concerned. However, we harbour the hope and we hold out our hand to those who one day will want to join these initiatives to get beyond the political deadlock, which is a source of concern for the state and the citizens. We welcome the efforts undertaken by Mr. Ghassan Salamé, Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Libya, and his team. Their efforts to bring together the views of the belligerents and to find solutions to the various problems that exist. The Government of National Accord also welcomed the roadmap put forward by Mr. Salameh during the high-level meeting on Libya, held on the same date last year, and in which the concerned parties were encouraged to show greater flexibility to solve points of dispute within the political situation, to implement the roadmap. Unfortunately, no progress has been seen. President, the Presidency Council of the Government of National Accord supports any initiative allowing for a comprehensive political solution. That is why we have engaged in dialogue with those calling for general elections to get beyond this political crisis, and we have supported the Electoral Commission to register voters, and the results have been encouraging, and the number of voters registered went beyond our expectations, and this reflects the willingness of Libyans to engage in elections. We also allocated 60 million Libyan dinars for the preparations for the elections, and we have worked with the relevant parties to ensure the necessary security conditions which will allow us to hold or to stick to the deadline. And we do hope that this popular claim will find a positive echo within the relevant institutions, which will ensure that the interests of the country will prevail, so as to ensure that the legislative and legal measures are taken to ensure that these elections can be held, and to unify, to bring together the state bodies to resolve the various problems that Libyans are facing. We are committed to continue our efforts to get beyond the crisis, and we will oppose all of those who attempt to impose their will through the use of weapons. We have condemned the attacks that recently took place in Tripoli, which led to material damage and the loss of human lives, terrorizing women and children. And this forced innocent civilians to move to other areas. We supported the initiative of Mr. Salameh, which allowed us to conclude the agreement for a ceasefire, and we call on the concerned parties to respect that ceasefire. And I can assure you that the institutions at a national level will ensure that the perpetrators of these tragic attacks are brought to book. We also intend to take the necessary security measures to respect the political agreement and to bring about peace and stability. Using weapons only benefits terrorists who find in the chaos an opportunity to act. I can see as an evidence of that the attacks against the National Oil Corporation in Tripoli. That is why the priority must be given to security and stability. This need must be backed by the international community, and we call for the special political mission to be converted into a mission to support security and stability in Libya. President, the Government of National Accord is striving to find solutions to the daily difficulties that Libyans are facing. We have begun electoral reforms to facilitate and enhance the living conditions of our citizens and to improve the performance of the sector, the security sector. In this context, we attach particular importance to the mobilization of financial resources so as to meet the needs of our people. We call on states that have Libyan assets to make the necessary arrangements to help the Presidency Council to implement the policies and programs geared towards achieving these goals. We condemn terrorism in all of its forms and manifestations, regardless of the perpetrators and the reasons. Terrorism is a global phenomenon which is the result of no particular religion, and as you know, my state has undertaken enormous sacrifices to deal with terrorist groups who have foreign fighters in their ranks, including Daesh, which has been brought from abroad and which is not only a threat to the stability of Libya, but they exploit our natural resources to use them to achieve their deadly agendas that have no connection to Islam. Libya has ratified all international conventions on the fight against terrorism and believes that the UN strategy to combat terrorism and its 4 pillars is one of the most significant international frameworks for national legislation in this domain. Terrorist networks are still being seen, and that is why we need to be vigilant, and we must strengthen regional and international cooperation so as to neutralize the terrorist networks wherever they may be found. Hence, the need to support and bolster regional and sub-regional cooperation. By way of example, I would like to mention the results achieved after ministerial meetings on strengthening security cooperation and monitoring common borders, the last of which was held in Khartoum, in which Sudan, Niger, Chad and Libya participated. This meeting led to a common plan emerging. This will receive support of the international community, we hope. We expressed our support to international efforts to fight against terrorism. And we also echoed the appeals calling for an international high-level conference to be held on the fight against terrorism. As concerns human rights, we are committed to upholding and protecting human rights. That is the reason why we have promulgated several laws, including the law on the establishment of political parties, the law on peaceful demonstrations, a law on criminalizing torture and enforced disappearances, a law to amend the penal code, and a law on transitional justice, which will soon enter into force to ensure national unity. When it comes to economic, social and cultural rights, we have been working tirelessly to improve the condition of women and to ensure gender equality without overlooking the need to ensure education and free medical care for all, pursuant to Article 7 of the Constitutional Declaration, which calls for respect for all conventions on the protection of human rights. We have ratified some of these conventions, including those on the rights of persons with disabilities, to which we are now a party. We once again reiterate our commitment to uphold human rights, but we are going through a transitional period, and we are facing security challenges, and human rights violations have been seen, and that is why we would like to benefit from technical assistance from the Human Rights Council and other UN programs. President, we are very interested in the issue. We pay great attention to the issue of illegal immigration. We every day are seeing waves of migration. Hundreds of thousands of people are in danger of being exploited by trafficking networks, and they perish in the Mediterranean. My country, which is a country of transit, is suffering the economic repercussions and the social and security consequences of this scourge. It is difficult now to contain the repercussions of this phenomenon without foreign assistance. Clearly, the security dimension alone will not make it possible for us to resolve this issue. We need to focus on the real causes which push people to undertake these difficult journeys. In this context, we welcome the efforts undertaken to reach an international agreement for safe, orderly and regular migration, which will be soon adopted in Marrakesh. However, we would have liked the compact to deal with this issue in a broader manner. We do hope that we will be able to find solutions so as to manage this phenomenon, which is a very great challenge for us. The international community must support countries of origin and encourage them to implement development programs and encourage them to enhance primary and tertiary sectors so as to fight against poverty, unemployment, and so as to ensure that their citizens do not engage in irregular migration. President, disarmament and the maintenance of international peace and security are issues that are very important to us. We have taken part in the various events related to these issues, and we have always respected international instruments in this domain. Indeed, the production and stockage of weapons of mass destruction is a threat to international peace and security, and for all of humanity. Libya also takes part in international efforts that have been made to destroy weapons of mass destruction and to maintain international peace and security. After joining the Convention on Chemical Weapons, Libya tackled its chemical stock and cooperated with the Secretariat of the Convention and international partners, and this made it possible for us to destroy that stock. We support international efforts to establish areas free of nuclear weapons, notably in the Middle East, so that this region is free from weapons of mass destruction. All states in the region must show transparency and say if they possess this kind of weapon or if they intend to do so. And they must join the NPT. We would like to underscore the need to respect the rights of states to use nuclear energy for peaceful means. and states who have destroyed or who have renounced weapons of mass destruction should be encouraged to receive support, to train persons in this area. President, 3 years have elapsed since the 2030 Agenda was adopted. However, we are facing several challenges as a result of political and security instability. You are certainly well aware that there can be no development without security and vice versa. It is therefore necessary that we overcome this crisis so that we can finally focus on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda and ensure the recovery of our economy. The Sustainable Development Agenda and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda underscore the need to mobilize financial resources to help states to implement the SDGs. My country's assets have been transferred abroad, and we would therefore call on other states to help us to implement the Sustainable Development Programme. Libyan funds have been suffering since 2011 as a result of the measures taken by the Security Council and the sanctions. The sanctions aim to preserve Libyan assets and not to erode them. However, we can see that these assets and these funds are being continually eroded, and we have called on the Security Council since March 2016. We have called on the sanctions regime to be amended so as to limit these losses. However, unfortunately, we have not seen any reaction to our justified requests. If nothing changes, Libyans will not have the opportunity to invest these funds into significant projects. President, we support the reforms started by the Secretary General, and we do hope that his efforts will make it possible for us to consolidate the authority of the UN, as was agreed during the 2005 Global Summit, and to allow it to adapt to the new realities of the international stage. However, the Security Council is still not involved in these reforms. We need to reform the Security Council, which no longer reflects the realities of the 21st century. The current geopolitical realities lend themselves to reforms to ensure equitable representation within the Security Council. We call for an end to be put to the historic injustice suffered by Africa, so as to allow it now to be part of the category of permanent and non-permanent members. We call for Africa to be given 2 permanent seats with the possibility of using the veto, and 2 non-permanent seats pursuant to the Esselwini Consensus and the Sirte Declaration. The African continent has the right to take part in decision-making within the Security Council, all the more so given that many of the issues discussed in the Security Council concern Africa. Satisfying this demand is the very least we can do to allow Africa to be represented in the Council, and also to correct the marginalization of Africa We call on coordination. We also call for the Arab states to be given equitable representation. President, the situation in the Middle East remains extremely difficult, and peace will be difficult when the Palestinians are continuing to suffer and settlements continue to be built and the city of Jerusalem continues to suffer and international resolutions continue to be ignored. We stand side by side with the Palestinian people, rejecting the law on the nation state of the Jewish people. This is a dangerous escalation and an attempt to try to ignore the Palestinian issue, trying to deprive the Palestinian people of their land. And this is unacceptable. We also refuse attempts to change the legal status of Jerusalem and attempts to impose the policy of a fait accompli by transferring embassies to Jerusalem. This goes against the relevant Security Council resolutions and resolutions of the General Assembly. We support the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination and to the establishment of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. We call for protection to be given to Palestinians and to compel the occupying authorities to stop violence, terrorism, and recurrent attacks against the Palestinian people. Furthermore, the people of Syria are experiencing disastrous humanitarian situations in some regions as a result of a conflict which has caused human and material damage on an enormous scale, and the displacement of many innocent Syrians. We condemn terrorist acts that are being suffered by the Palestinian people, and we call on for international efforts to find a peaceful solution and to avoid or to ensure that the aspirations of the Syrian people to live in a country given by the rule of law can be realized, to ensure the upholding of human rights. With regard to Yemen, we express our concern with regard to the situation, the humanitarian situation there, and the disastrous consequences of that. This conflict is a threat to the security of the country and the region. We call for an end to the bloodbath in that country and to alleviate the suffering of this brotherly people. In conclusion, I would like to state that the challenges we are facing require a UN that is stronger and a UN that is able to adapt to developments on the international scene and to solve conflicts through peaceful means. I thank you.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Libya for his statement.